வாழ்க வளமுடன்.
Valamudu. Or am audible, sir?
We'll start the meditation.
Yes, it's audible, ma'am. Please proceed.
Be blessed by the divine. Be blessed by the divine. Be blessed by the divine. The atmosphere around us is being purified by the divine power. The atmosphere around us is being purified by the divine power. The atmosphere around us is being purified by the divine power. The divine power descends upon us, and our body and soul are being purified. May the divine power protect us, guide us, and lead us day and night, at all times, at all places, and in all our activities. Salutation to Mother, salutation to Father, salutation to our Guru Vethathiri Maharishi. Duriyam meditation. Let us start our meditation at Agna Chakra, in between the eyebrows.
Are you on?
Duriyam. Concentrate on crown chakra.
can say Professor Krish. Professor Krish. I don't know how come you are not being seen.
Concentrate on crown chakra. Conclude the meditation. May the energy be spread throughout the body. May the body and soul be purified. By the grace of the divine power, we will enjoy good health, long life, enough wealth, prosperity, and wisdom. Blessings, Vethathiri promoted by our Guru Vethathiri Maharishi, be blessed by the divine. The World Community Service Center, be blessed by the divine. The Temple of Consciousness at Aliyar, be blessed by the divine. Sky meditation centers and trusts all around the world, be blessed by the divine. All those who have joined us in the Consciousness 360 program over the Zoom Meet, be blessed by the divine. Twofold moral principle: in my lifetime will not cause any suffering to the body or mind of any person. I will strive to remove the miseries of others to the extent possible. May peace prevail in us. May peace prevail around us. May peace prevail all over the world. Peace, peace, peace. Be blessed by the divine.
Be blessed by the divine. Thank you, Professor, for conducting such a blissful meditation. Today, the 6th February 2021, Saturday, we are happy to welcome you for the Consciousness 360 degree Confluence, The fifth meeting hosted by our World Community Service Center R&D department. To give away the welcome address of today's session, may I request Professor Dr. Prasad Sekar Patala. A few words about Dr. Prasad is a member and practitioner of Vethathirian close to about 20 years, associated with the Sky Center, North Wales, USA, and for the past 2+ years currently. Sir, by profession is a veterinarian, scientist, IT and a management consultant, business leader, entrepreneur in human pharmaceutical, life sciences, and animal health. Over to you, Dr. Sekar Patala. Be blessed by the divine.
Somebody else from US.
Bear with this, we are trying to connect him. Wargolamden.
Dr. Gupta ji, Vijay Gupta ji,
Okay. May we request Dr. Gupta ji to preside it over? Looks like there is some technical challenges in reaching Dr. Prasad.
They are asking you.
Yeah. Hello, good morning. Good evening in India. We are honored to be here. And I am happy to share a few words with the audience here. Brain and consciousness is a very important topic. Everybody knows something about brain, but consciousness is more elusive. Swamiji wrote very much about consciousness, and consciousness exists in all beings as pattern, precision, regularity, and those of us who are practicing sky meditation know much more about it. I am honored to be talking to the audience here and giving few words of introduction. Uh, the basic issue about consciousness is, I want to know, can you, Dr. Rabindranath, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Please carry on.
I am assuming
Yes.
okay. Okay, I'm assuming that everybody can hear me. I was saying that about consciousness. Consciousness in the world remains elusive. There is much written, much being written about it. But Swamiji simplified the concepts, and those of you who are practicing Pi already know about it. Uh, there is not much. I want to add that Swamiji gave 4 axioms. Self-contractive force, one, consciousness is another one, time is the third one, and plenum the fourth one. So consciousness is one of the 4 axioms. But then everything else follows as an outcome from macro to micro. So it's a very beautiful understanding of the divine principle, and I will urge you to read this in case you have not. I again am very happy to be here, welcoming all of you to this Consciousness 360 degrees, and thanking Dr. Rabindranath, who is hosting this.
Walter Valamudan. Thank you, Sri Gupta ji, for being an impromptu welcome address speaker. And sorry for the inconvenience as we could not able to connect with the one designated. Let's move on to the main interesting topic of today's session is brain and consciousness. Our Guru, Vethathiri Maharishi, has made all his lifetime efforts to elucidate to every one of us, from a layman to a scholar, and to know about it. Yet, today, thanks to Dr. Rabindranath ji, our R&D Director, for taking this initiative on this forum, on this weekly conclave, and the theme of Consciousness 360 to impart the same thing to the current world. To conduct this brainstorming session on the topic brain and consciousness, we have with us our IT Director of World Community Service Center, Senior Professor Krish Murali Eswar. All I can say in just 3 words about Sir is MIT, Mobile Information Thesaurus. Over to Sir. வாழ்க வளமுடன்.
This is such an incredible story. A teenage boy regains consciousness a day after his parents agree to donate his organs. 13-year-old Trenton McKinley fractured his skull in a dune buggy accident 2 months ago, leaving him brain dead for days. Right before doctors were about to take him off life support in Alabama, he came back to life. Before that moment, Trenton thought he was in heaven.
I was walking down. It was more like an open field, walking straight. There's no other explanation but God. There's no other way that I could have came back.
Trenton's family says he's getting stronger every day. That is an amazing story.
வாழ்க வளமுடன். Be blessed by the divine. Brain and consciousness. Even if the part of the brain gets damaged, one can still remain conscious. Consciousness is a miraculous worker that finds the brain as its functional center. What does scientists say about brain and consciousness?
Here are 2 images of a house. There's one obvious difference, but to this patient, PS, they looked completely identical. PS had suffered a stroke that damaged the right side of her brain, leaving her unaware of everything on her left side. But though she could discern no difference between the houses, when researchers asked her which she would prefer to live in, she chose the house that wasn't burning. Not once, but again and again. PS's brain was still processing information from her whole field of vision. She could see both images and tell the difference between them. She just didn't know it. If someone threw a ball at her left side, she might duck, but she wouldn't have any awareness of the ball, or any idea why she ducked. PS's condition, known as hemispatial neglect, reveals an important distinction between the brain's processing of information and our experience of that processing. That experience is what we call consciousness. We are conscious of both the external world and our internal selves. We are aware of an image in much the same way we are aware of ourselves looking at an image, or our inner thoughts and emotions. But where does consciousness come from? Scientists, theologians, and philosophers have been trying to get to the bottom of this question for centuries without reaching any consensus. One recent theory is that consciousness is the brain's imperfect picture of its own activity. To understand this theory, it helps to have a clear idea of one important way the brain processes information from our senses. Based on sensory input, it builds models, which are continuously updating simplified descriptions of objects and events in the world. Everything we know is based on these models. They never capture every detail of the things they describe, just enough for the brain to determine appropriate responses. For instance, one model built deep into the visual system codes white light as brightness without color. In reality, white light includes wavelengths that correspond to all the different colors we can see. Our perception of white light is wrong and oversimplified, but good enough for us to function. Likewise, the brain's model of the physical body keeps track of the configuration of our limbs, but not of individual cells or even muscles, because that level of information isn't needed to plan movement. If it didn't have the model keeping track of the body's size, shape, and how it is moving at any moment, we would quickly injure ourselves. The brain also needs models of itself. For example, the brain has the ability to pay attention to specific objects and events. It also controls that focus, shifting it from one thing to another, internal and external, according to our needs. Without the ability to direct our focus, we wouldn't be able to assess threats, finish a meal, or function at all. To control focus effectively, the brain has to construct a model of its own attention. With 86 billion neurons constantly interacting with each other, there's no way the brain's model of its own information processing can be perfectly self-descriptive. But like the model of the body, or our conception of white light, it doesn't have to be. Our certainty that we have a metaphysical, subjective experience may come from one of the brain's models, a cut-corner description of what it means to process information in a focused and deep manner. Scientists have already begun trying to figure out how the brain creates that self-model. MRI studies are a promising avenue for pinpointing the networks involved. These studies compare patterns of neural activation when someone is and isn't conscious of a sensory stimulus, like an image. The results show that the areas needed for visual processing are activated whether or not the participant is aware of the image, but a whole additional network lights up only when they are conscious of seeing the image. Patients with hemispatial neglect, like PS, typically have damage to one particular part of this network. More extensive damage to the network can sometimes lead to a vegetative state, with no sign of consciousness. Evidence like this brings us closer to understanding how consciousness is built into the brain, but there's still much more to learn. For instance, the way neurons in the networks related to consciousness compute specific pieces of information is outside the scope of our current technology. As we approach questions of consciousness with science, we'll open new lines of inquiry into human identity.
It is clear that the brain is the seat of consciousness. Does it mean that every action of ours is governed by the brain? Of course it is. We all know that. But does it also mean that we can control the actions of others with our brain?
The brain is an amazing and complex organ. And while many people are fascinated by the brain, they can't really tell you that much about the properties about how the brain works because we don't teach neuroscience in schools. And one of the reasons why is that the equipment is so complex and so expensive that it's really only done at major universities and large institutions. And so in order to be able to access the brain, you really need to, dedicate your life and spend 6.5 years as a graduate student just to become a neuroscientist to get access to these tools. And that's a shame because 1 out of 5 of us, that's 20% of the entire world, will have a neurological disorder. And there are 0 cures for these diseases. And so it seems that what we should be doing is sort of reaching back earlier in the education process and sort of teaching students about neuroscience, and so that in the future they may be thinking about possibly becoming a brain scientist. And so when I was a graduate student, my lab mate Tim Marzullo and myself decided that, what if we took this complex equipment that we have for studying the brain and made it simple enough and affordable enough that anyone, an amateur or a high school student could learn and actually participate in the discovery of neuroscience. And so we did just that. A few years ago, we started a company called Backyard Brains, and we make DIY neuroscience equipment. And I brought some here tonight, and I want to do some demonstrations. You guys want to see some? All right. So I need a volunteer. So right before, what is your name? All right, Sam. I'm going to record from your brain. Have you had this before? No. Okay. All right. I need you to stick out your arm for science. Roll up your sleeve a bit. All right. And so what I'm going to do, I'm putting electrodes on your arm, and you're probably wondering, I just said I'm going to record from your brain. What am I doing with your arm? You have about 80 billion neurons inside your brain right now. They're sending electrical messages back and forth and chemical messages. But some of your neurons right here in your motor cortex are going to send messages down when you move your arm like this. It's going to go down across your corpus callosum, down onto your spinal cord, your lower motor neuron, out to your muscles here. And that is electrical discharge. It's going to be picked up by these electrodes right here. And we're going to be able to listen to exactly what your brain is going to be doing. So I'm going to turn this on for a second. Have you ever heard what your brain sounds like? All right, let's turn it on. So go ahead, whenever you go ahead and squeeze your hand. All right, so what you're listening to, so this is your motor units that are happening right here. Okay, so let's take a look at it as well. So I'm going to stand over here, and I'm going to open up our app here. So So now I want you to squeeze. Yeah, so right here, these are the motor units that are happening from her spinal cord out to her muscle right here. And as she's doing it, you're seeing the electrical activity that's happening here. We can even click here and try to see one of them. So keep doing it really, really hard. Yeah, so now we've paused on one motor action potential that's happening right now inside of your brain. Okay, do you guys want to see some more? All right. That's interesting, but let's get it better. Okay, I need one more volunteer. Okay, what is your name, sir? Miguel, all right. You're going to stand right here. So Miguel, when you're moving your arm like this, your brain is sending a signal down to your muscles right here. I want you to move your arm as well. All right, so your brain is going to send a signal down to your muscles. And so it turns out that there is a nerve that's right here that runs up here that innervates these three fingers. And it's close enough to the skin that we might be able to stimulate that. So that we can do is copy your brain signal that's going out to your hand and inject it into your hand so that your hand will move when your brain tells your hand to move. And so in a sense, she will take away your free will and you will no longer have any control over this hand, okay? You with me? All right, so I just need to hook you up. All right, so I'm going to find your ulnar nerve, which is probably right around here. You don't know what you're signing up for when you come up. So now I'm going to move away and I'm going to plug it into our human-to-human interface over here. Okay, so Sam wants you to squeeze your hand again. All right, do it again. All right, perfect. So now I'm going to hook you up over here so that you get the stimulus. It's going to feel a little bit weird at first. This is going to feel like you know, when you lose your free will and someone else becomes your agent, it does feel a bit strange. So I want you to relax your hand. All right, and Sam, you're with me? All right, so you're gonna squeeze. I'm not going to turn it on yet, so go ahead and give it a squeeze. All right. So now, are you ready, Miguel?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, so I've turned it on. So go ahead and turn your hand. Do you feel that a little bit?
No.
Okay, do it again.
No, a little bit.
A little bit. Okay, so relax. No, hit it again. Okay. Oh, perfect, perfect. All right, so relax. Do it again. All right, so now. All right, so right now, your brain is controlling your arm, and it's also controlling his arm. So go ahead and just do it one more time. All right, so that's perfect. So now, what would happen if I took over my control of your hand? And so just relax your hand. What happens? Nothing. Why not? Because the brain has to do it. Now you do it again. All right, that's perfect. All right, well, thank you guys for being such a good sport. This is what's happening all across the world, electrophysiology. And we're going to bring on the neural revolution. Thank you.
Electrophysiology, a new science providing us tools and techniques and methods to study the human brain and its interconnectedness with consciousness. Well, yes, brain sends waves, and these waves have been studied about a century or so with the use of electroencephalogram, EEG machines. The human mind thinks, brain sends out magnetic waves, the body acts on it. Now wait, does it mean that every brain thought or brain wave is an actionable thought? If we capture these thoughts, can we drive a car?
Autonomous Labs proudly presents How to Drive with Your Brain. In this video, we're going to show you how to control a car using brain sensors. On the left is our car. On the right, you can see the EEG sensors used for measuring brain activity. The human brain produces electromagnetic signals. They can be measured using a special cap with 16 sensors. The measurements from the sensors can be interpreted as patterns by the computer. The test subject puts the sensor cap on and trains the computer. The software learns to associate two different brain patterns with left or right directions. Once the training is finished, we can ask the test subject to move a cube to the right or to the left of the computer screen. Hey, just by thinking two different things, you can control the computer. In our first experiment, the test subject uses the sensor cap to give commands to our autonomous car. The car is equipped with video cameras, radars, and laser sensors that provide the car with a full three-dimensional view of its surroundings. the car drives automatically to the corner. At the intersection, the test subject orders the car to take a right. The car continues automatically. The small frame on the upper right shows the laser sensor readings. The frame in the lower right shows the brain command for the car. After a small delay, the car turns around the corner, as you can see. For our second experiment, we trained the computer to recognize 4 brain patterns. The test subject can steer the car to the left or the right. He can also accelerate or decelerate the car. Of course, you should never try this at home. For safety reasons, we tested in a large open space at Tempelhof Airport in Berlin. You can see here the test subject incrementing or decrementing the steering angle. There's a slight delay between the brain command and the steering action. Remember, this is just a proof of concept. The task here was to show free driving by detecting brain patterns. There's still a long way to go until we can really take full control of machines with our brains.
What an intelligent species this human being is. Consciousness evolved as intelligence in all life forms. Would you agree that? Let's see how intelligence evolved and how it continues to evolve and continues to help us. Let us see how intelligence evolved in life forms.
Humans are proud of a lot of things, from particle accelerators to poetry to Pokemon. All of them made possible because of something humans value extremely highly: intelligence. We think of intelligence as a trait, like height or strength, but when we try to define it, things get fuzzy. In a nutshell, intelligence is a mechanism to solve problems, especially the problem of staying alive, which involves finding food and shelter, fighting sexual competitors, or fleeing from predators. Intelligence is not a single thing. It includes the ability to gather knowledge, to learn, be creative, form strategies, or engage in critical thinking. It manifests itself in a huge variety of behaviors, from hardwired or instinct-like reactions to different degrees of learning to some sort of awareness. But not all scientists agree where it begins or what even should count as intelligence. To make this even more complicated, intelligence is also connected to consciousness, since awareness is helpful for problem solving. Intelligence isn't exactly clear-cut, so maybe we can think of it as more like a flexible set of skills, a toolbox. Basic tools. The most basic tools in the intelligence toolbox are the ability to gather information, to save it, and to use it to learn. Information about the world is gathered through senses such as vision, sound, smell, touch, or taste, and helps us navigate and react to the external world appropriately. But living things also need to keep track of the state of their own bodies, monitoring things like hunger and fatigue. Information is the basis of action for all living things, and without it, you're at the mercy of your surroundings, unable to react appropriately or flexibly. Information is much more powerful if we can keep and save it. So the second tool is memory. Memory is the ability to save and recall information so a living being doesn't have to start from scratch every time it perceives something relevant. Memories can be about events, places, and associations, but also behaviors like hunting or foraging methods. Some of these, like flying, have to be repeated over and over until they're mastered. This is what we call learning, the process of putting together a sequence of thoughts or actions. Basically a string of repeatable behaviors that can be varied and adapted. These three tools enable seemingly stupid creatures to act in surprisingly intelligent ways. The acellular slime mold, which is basically just a single huge slimy cell, shows behavior similar to an animal with a simple brain. When put in a maze with food at one end, the slime mold explores its surroundings and marks its path with slime trails, sort of smearing memories on the ground. As it continues exploring, it avoids the marked pathways and finds its way to the food. Instead of blindly getting stuck in dead ends, the slime mold adapts its behavior to save time and effort. This behavior is hardwired, and scientists can't agree if that's intelligent, although it does give the slime mold a certain advantage. Bees are an example of more adaptive smart behavior. Scientists trained bumblebees to move a colored ball into a goalpost for a sugar reward. Not only were the bees very skillful at this behavior, which isn't natural to them, they got more efficient over time. When several balls were available, bees chose the ball that lay closest to the goal, even if it was a different color than the ball they were trained with. For more challenging problems, we need even more flexibility. Fancier tools. Building on the basic tools, more complex animals have a wider range of problems they can solve. They can memorize all kinds of associations, connections, and mechanical tricks. We'll call this tool the Library of Knowledge. Take raccoons. Their favorite kind of food is human food. Their approach to getting hold of such treats depends upon an assortment of theoretical and practical skills that makes them master burglars, able to open windows or pick locks. In a study, raccoons were given boxes secured with different kinds of locks, like latches, bolts, plugs, or push bars. They needed less than 10 attempts to figure out how to open each box, even when different locks were put together into increasingly difficult combinations that had to be solved in the right order and with different amounts of strength. A year later, the raccoons still remembered how to open the boxes and were as fast as when they had first solved the puzzle. Beyond our library of associations and skills, the most impressive tool in our box is creativity, a sort of mental duct tape. Being creative means producing something new and valuable from apparently unrelated things. In the context of intelligence, this means making new and unusual connections, pairing input with memories and skills to come up with a unique solution to a problem. In another raccoon study, researchers showed the animals that by dropping pebbles into a water tank, they could raise the water level enough to reach a marshmallow floating at the top. One raccoon came up with a much better solution. It tipped the tub over. Another facet of creativity is applying a new resource to a task, physical tools. Like primates that use sticks to fish for termites in trees, or some octopuses which assemble collected coconut shells around themselves as a sort of portable armor to hide from enemies. Collecting materials for later use is connected to an even more advanced dimension of problem solving, planning. Planning means considering the activities required for a desired goal and putting them together in a plan. When unforeseen circumstances and new possibilities present themselves, they need to be assessed according to whether they match the plan or not. An example of this intelligent behavior is hoarding food to eat it later. This is an instinctive behavior in squirrels. But even though hiding food comes instinctively to them, they still need to use advanced thinking skills to make the best decisions. Squirrels examine every nut and weigh the time and effort it would take to hide it against the benefits they would get from each one. Damaged or low-fat nuts are eaten right away, while nuts that still need to ripen go on the stockpile. Squirrels also pretend to bury nuts when they feel watched. These empty caches distract rivals from their real treasure. This is pretty advanced strategizing because to make a plan to distract someone else, you first have to be aware that there are others like you that want the same things. The more complex the problem, the more tools are needed in combination to solve it. So the more tools there are, the more flexibility a being has to solve the challenges life throws at them. But even for complex problems, each animal's individual situation is what counts. Squirrels are omnivores that defend their territories fiercely. For them, it makes sense to remember where there's food in different locations and trick their enemies to improve their chances of survival. Sheep don't have any such refined tricks up their sleeve, but they don't need to. They are grazers and live in flocks. The skills relevant to them are social. They recognize and remember many different sheep and even humans for years, a completely different skill. Evolving and retaining a complex set of mental abilities they might never use would be a waste of resources for them. Humans went the opposite way and invested in an unusually diverse intelligence toolkit. While this was helpful, by accident, we added another set of tools on top, culture. No single person could ever build a space rocket or particle accelerator. But thanks to our ability to work together and to share knowledge across generations, we can overcome challenges beyond any single individual's ability. This allowed us to shape the planet to our liking. We also created new problems in the process: Sudoku, tax forms, string theory, but also rapid climate change and antibiotic resistance. To solve these, we'll need to look past short-term survival and think about the distant future. We have the toolbox. We just need to use it.
Human brain is the most advanced and highly evolved instrument, a seed for consciousness to function. What is the brain? There are 86 billion neurons in the brain. Each neuron has got a dendrite, a soma, and an axon. A dendrite receives the signal. The soma processes the signal. Axon sends out a signal. If we can put in some kind of a computer in the human brain and study the functioning part of these neurons, perhaps we can download our mind, the functional consciousness. Outer peripheral consciousness can easily be studied. Perhaps certain inner consciousness signals, such as development of diseases in the body, can also be studied if only we can get access to the functional center of consciousness, our neurons in the brain. Is this possible?
In a lot of ways, it's kind of like a Fitbit in your skull with tiny wires.
Neuralink wants to connect our brains to computers, and now it's showed off a device reading a pig's brain signals in real time. But how does it work, and will it turn you into a cyborg? I'm going to break it all down for you. Elon Musk is at it again. This time he was unveiling a new brain-computer interface. It's called the Link, and he says that one day it could cure everything from paralysis to blindness. Now, I'm going to explain all of this to you using the Galaxy Brain meme. Just think starting off basic, and then I'm going to blow your mind. So step one, the basics. Our brains are made up of billions of neurons, cells with long, spindly arms that send messages via electrical spikes. Those spikes in electricity travel between neurons in a chain reaction, sending messages to the parts of our brain that control speech or movement, for example. When you move your arm, that action started as an electrical spike up here, which leads us to the second part of the Galaxy Brain meme, how Neuralink plans to read those electric spikes. According to Neuralink, your brain cells are kind of like electrical wiring, and rather than just having neurons sending electrical signals, those signals could be sent and received by a chip. Elon Musk unveiled Neuralink's implantable brain chip, the Link version 0.9. It's a brain-computer interface designed to be implanted directly into the brain by a surgical robot. Same-day surgery without a big incision or general anesthesia.
You remove about a coin-sized piece of skull, and then you can just walk around right afterwards. It's pretty cool.
The chip plugs into your brain directly via tiny microscopic threads. They're about 1/20th of the width of a human hair, and they connect with the neurons in your brain to receive and send electrical signals. Importantly, Neuralink says these electrodes won't damage your brain.
If they're inserted very carefully, so that the robot actually images the brain and makes sure to avoid any veins or arteries so that the electrodes can be inserted with no noticeable damage. You sort of think like if you stab something with a wire, surely it will bleed, but actually at a really small scale, it does not.
Now, I can't believe I'm giving you specs on a brain chip, but here we go. It has an all-day battery life, wireless charging, and it's designed to wirelessly connect to your phone via Bluetooth with a range of 5 to 10 meters. And the whole thing, the chip, the surgery, the full cyborg experience, will start off expensive, but Musk says it'll hopefully eventually only cost a couple of $1,000s. He wants it to be about as expensive as laser eye surgery. Okay, so you're with me so far. I'm going to expand the brain meme. We're going to Sparkle Brain, and this is where it gets weird. Elon Musk did a demo and brought out 3 live pigs, one without a brain implant, one who'd had a link implanted and then had it removed without any issues, and a third pig named Gertrude that had had a chip in for 2 months. We got to see a live reading of the neurons in the pig's brain firing in real time, specifically the neurons that were sending and receiving messages from her snout.
So what the beeps you're hearing are real-time signals from the neural link in Gertrude's head. So this neural link connects to neurons that are in her snout. So whenever she snuffles around and touches something with her snout, that sends out neural spikes, which are detected here.
We also saw the chip predicting the pig's movements based on brain activity, and we saw the electrodes firing and stimulating neurons and lighting up different brain regions. And that opens the door to some pretty game-changing applications for the link, beyond creating some kind of pork-borg. Neuralink's head neurosurgeon, Matthew McDougall, said the first trials of the link would be aimed at treating things like paraplegia. The company said it received FDA breakthrough device designation in July. Now, that's not the same as FDA approval, but it is a fast track to getting a medical device out in the field. But Neuralink doesn't want to stop there, and that is where we go full galaxy brain. There was talk of curing blindness by implanting the link in the visual cortex, treating mental health conditions like depression, anxiety, and addiction, connecting the link to a heads-up display so you could walk around like the Terminator. And then there were basic ideas like, I don't know, telepathy, replaying your own memories, superhuman vision, and the ability to see ultraviolet light. Oh, and connecting your brain and uploading it into a robot.
I mean, this is obviously sounding increasingly like a Black Mirror episode. Everything that's encoded in memory, you could upload. You could basically store your memories as a backup and restore the memories. And ultimately, you could potentially download them into a new body or into a robot body. The future is going to be weird.
The brain can easily be studied with the advent of a technology like Neuralink. Where did this consciousness begin to evolve, and why did it evolve the way it has evolved today? Consciousness has evolved over billions of years. Technologies like Neuralink are helping us today to study the functional part of this consciousness in the human brain and in other brains. If it is possible indeed to understand how consciousness began to evolve at the original state, then that perhaps would give us some insights into understanding this beautiful interconnectedness between brain and consciousness. Where did consciousness begin to evolve? What is that primary instinct that we have? Hunger.
Consciousness is perhaps the biggest riddle in nature. Stripped to its core meaning, consciousness is what allows us to be aware both of our surroundings and of our own inner state. But thinking about consciousness has this habit of taking us round in circles. We all intuitively know what consciousness is. It's this. It's what you're experiencing here, right now. But once we try to pinpoint just what exactly it is, it leaves us grasping at thin air. And not just us. Philosophers and scientists struggle to define consciousness. Different schools and ideas compete with one another, but no one has come close to figuring it out. It's unsettling to realize that we don't understand what makes us aware of ourselves and the world. In this fuzzy area, consciousness and intelligence are also related, although they are not the same. Like much of what makes us human, our consciousness is likely to have evolved from less complex forms as a product of evolution by natural selection. It has probably emerged from an immense several 100 million year sequence of countless microsteps that together make up a sort of gradient of consciousness. What was the first step on this path from the non-conscious to the basic consciousness that ultimately led to the convoluted consciousness we humans enjoy today? Take a stone. The consensus is that a stone is not conscious, though not everyone agrees even on this. Some panpsychists claim that a lump of rock may have an inner life. However, there are no real grounds for any such assumption, since stones never show behavior. Their inner life can neither be proven nor disproven. A more common starting point is with living things. A living thing, or a self, is a part of the universe that sustains itself and makes more of its kind. To do so, it needs energy. And this is where an awareness of the world comes in handy. The original function of consciousness was probably to direct a mobile self that was short of energy to a fresh supply of food. On the smaller scales of life, you don't need to be aware to find food. Trichoplax adherens, one of the simplest of all animals, moves around haphazardly. It slows down in the presence of food and speeds up in its absence. This is highly effective and makes the tiny creature spend more time where there is food than where there is not. But it never moves in a particular direction towards a particular target, and there's no need for it to be conscious of its environment. The first major step towards consciousness was probably taken when mobile selves started to move themselves directionally, moving towards what was good for them, say food, and away from what was less good, say someone else who thought that they were food. Take Dugicia tigrina, a tiny worm known for its funny face. Sometimes the worm is hungry and sometimes not. This means that when it moves, the worm self is not simply producing an automatic response to an external stimulus, but that its actions depend upon its inner physiological state, whether it's hungry or sated. When it's just eaten, the worm is less energetic, but when starved for a while, it will move itself in the direction of tasty things. It uses chemoreceptors on its head to smell its environment and guide it in the direction where the scent of food is strongest. After finding and eating a meal, our worm buddy heads back to a dark, sheltered spot to digest it in safety, until it's hungry again. But animals that blindly follow their sense of smell don't have a concrete objective in view. They still lack any sense of where they are heading. So the next step on the ladder of consciousness is to add some perception at a distance, like vision. Vision adds context and depth to our world. With vision comes a sense of the space we and our food exist in. It adds a whole new dimension to awareness and is a huge step towards more familiar consciousness. An optical apparatus like an eye enables us to visualize our goal and lock onto it. But even at this stage, a self is only able to pursue its food as long as it sees it. So the next logical step needs to happen on the inside. To visualize food in its absence, for example, a self needs to create some sort of inner representation of the world. Now an animal can continue looking for food even when it escapes its sensory range. Because of this inner representation of what is relevant in the world, it can remain focused on its food and its desire to get it. Our self now exists in a world it can get familiar with. The ability to remember things has emerged. Thanks to memory, animals can be distracted from a pursuit for a few seconds, but quickly continue their path afterwards. A related phenomenon is called object permanence. This describes our awareness that things continue to exist even when we can't see them. This cognitive skill is enjoyed by some mammals and birds, and perhaps other animals too. Human babies tend to develop this ability around the time they turn 8 months, while baby chickens show this ability within a day or two of being born. The capacity to remember a thing in its absence suggests at least a basic sense of time. A sense of time is a big step on the ladder of consciousness. It may also enable a self to look forward from the present moment and anticipate the future. Adult chickens, for example, are able to resist a meal put in front of them if they expect to receive a bigger meal as a prize for holding back for a while. This sort of delayed gratification means there is an ability to visualize a reward that only exists in the future, which can be quite a challenge even for adult humans. Western scrub jays are experts in delayed gratification. They show an even more elaborate sense of the future when they hide food in a cache to retrieve it at a later date. The scrub jays will even re-hide their food if they become aware that a potential thief has been watching them. This means that they know that there are other hungry selves out there who are aware and see the world from their own different perspective. Crafty scrub jays can sort of read the mind of their fellow birds. This ability to mind read is crucial for complex levels of consciousness. By putting yourself in the position of others, you can outsmart a rich competitor or empathize with a hungry friend. Language takes the ability to read minds and represent what is absent to a whole new level. Words enable us to construct hypotheses about the world, make detailed plans, and to communicate them with others. Words enable us to think about ourselves and our place in the universe, and even about our own consciousness, which is something we'll be doing more in future videos. So what is the origin of our consciousness? It probably began as the directed motion of a hungry self towards a source of food, with the survival benefits this gave it over competitors that moved at random or not at all. It probably all started with the urge for more food. So even with the sophisticated consciousness that allows us to dream about space, build skyscrapers, or obsess about novels, it's not surprising that we can't stop thinking about where we'll get our next meal. Collectively, we've put so much thought and ingenuity into getting food that we can now just get our food to come to us with little conscious effort.
Consciousness has evolved. The brain is the functional center of the consciousness. The brain, the human brain, is made up of 86 billion neurons. A neuron is a cell. What is a cell? 99.99999999% of an atom is filled with quantum energy, quarks, the scientists call them as. Swamiji called this energy as the primordial energy. He said that it is the same primordial energy that is functioning as consciousness in each one of us. It is functioning as consciousness in every life form. In the living beings, this is fractional consciousness. But in the universe, this is universal consciousness.
Consciousness. It is something that we all have, yet remains the most mysterious human trait. This is a quality that every human being possesses. We can be aware of our own consciousness during waking times, when we are deep in contemplation, or even pondering the vastness of the universe. To better understand what consciousness is, many attempts have been made to define exactly what it is. Perhaps it is that state of wakefulness when you are aware of your surroundings. Some say that it is the ability to be aware of something going on within oneself. Others say that it is a sense of self-awareness. All of these are considered to be valid descriptions of consciousness. Since time immemorial, philosophers have debated the exact nature of consciousness and what it means to be a sentient or even sapient being. Advances in neuroscience have given us an intricate understanding of exactly how the brain works. We know the regions of the brain where memories are stored, where information from our eyes and ears are formed. We have even been able to transmit thoughts from one person to another via advanced neurotechnology. However, the source or cause of consciousness continues to elude even the most diligent of seekers. But there are some who may have found the answer.
Because everybody's totally fixed on matter is the ultimate reality, they're trying to explain how consciousness could possibly come out of matter, and they're getting nowhere. They've got theories in quantum physics that try, theories in information sciences, chemical theories. Nothing works. But nobody dares question the assumption, and the assumption is that matter is unconscious. And that's the problem. If matter is unconscious, the problem is how on earth does consciousness, awareness, ever arise out of something that has no awareness?
Matter and energy are emanations of some deeper intrinsic order. All these seemingly separate selves, seemingly separate identities, going about their own lives, living what appears to be a separate existence. And yet we are all fundamentally sharing the same unified consciousness that the universe is made of. We've now seen scientific proof that the universe emanates from a geometric seed that doesn't have any space or time. Since we are conscious, consciousness must be in that seed. All of the universe is emanating from this. So there is scientific grounding to support the law of one philosophical stance, which is that in fact there is a one infinite creator and the universe itself is a living conscious being. Space, time, energy, matter, and biology are created by a universal consciousness.
Our idea about subatomic particles are, as physics class has shown us, little billiard balls. You know, that's what we think of. But actually, a subatomic particle is not that. It's a vibrating packet of energy, trading information and energy with other subatomic particles and this background energy field. So a subatomic particle is essentially a shapeshifter. So when you look down at matter at that tiny level, what you find is there's no such thing as a thing. The unit of the universe isn't a thing, it's a relationship. It's the relationship between those subatomic particles.
Scientists have been able to detect and record this energy field, but what we see as a background energy field may well be a unified field of intelligent energy. This energy is more than just intelligent. It is omnipresent throughout all of time and space and permeates everything in existence.
We've looked at the idea that the gravitational field is in fact a fluid-like essence of the universe that all matter arises from. It's the source of matter, energy, consciousness, spirituality. All of the things that we see in the universe, both physical and non-physical, arise from this source field.
When you start factoring in the whole idea of a quantum energy field, then that is a wonderful, neat metaphor to understand things that connections that occur between people or between people and other living things like plants across time and across space.
It is a self-organizing universe and it is a self-correcting universe. The embryo knows how to turn into a baby. The acorn knows how to turn into an oak tree. Within nature, it is obvious that there is a natural intelligence at work.
Marcus Aurelius, in his writing The Meditations, contemplated, "For there is one universe made up of all things, and one God who pervades all things, and one substance, and one law, and one reason." In a lesser-known work of Charles Darwin, The Formation of Vegetable Mold Through the Action of Worms, he documented how far earthworms acted consciously and how much mental power they displayed. He concluded that there was no absolute threshold between lower and higher animals. Even Albert Einstein offered support to this idea of a unified consciousness with all living things. In his 1949 work, The World as I See It, he calls for us to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature.
Whatever that original source of consciousness that has brought everything into creation, visible and invisible, we're just aspects of that. It actually highlights how much bigger and greater the Creator is.
If I realize that I am a child of God, that I'm just an idea in the mind of God, then and only then do I get to realize that you are the same thing. And on that realm, there is no separation between us. On that realm, there is no competition between us.
We're talking about a universal consciousness where I'm going to talk to the Spirit of God within every living being. Now, whether we call that the zero-point energy field, we call that universal intelligence, we call it God. The zero-point energy field is the new name for God. So it's an ocean of holographic records that houses within it the history of every living being and makes the connection possible through means of a quantum process. And that quantum process is unconditional love.
Unconditional love is the key to understanding the nature of our connection. While this intelligent and creative field permeates everything in our universe, its loving and creative nature is what draws us all together and binds us to the universe and each other.
If my energy is not coming from love, compassion, and forgiveness by whatever name I give it, then I am making a world that will not be happy for myself and others, by the way.
You've got religious fears, you've got skepticism, you've got all sorts of walls that are there to stop humanity to increase its own cosmic consciousness. And they're all distancing themselves from the spirit and from the faith and the truth of God. And that's wrong. You cannot let go of the Creator.
We have a metaphor of ourselves, or an image of ourselves, as the hero up against it all. The whole idea is about being right, being first, being individual. That's been our programming. If we have a hard drive, it's been programmed with I win, you lose. This is absolutely against nature, and that's why we're in the mess we're in. This is what selfish looks like. You know, it's hard to understand how much that definition of ourselves really informs how we operate, because not all cultures do. They think of themselves as being all connected, and from that, they create a very different kind of society.
You are born with divine consciousness. The whole point of being on the earth is to realize that and live your life in the pursuit of justice and compassion from the profoundest peace and the wildest, wildest love. A state of joyful, interpenetrating, interrelated love with all things is already here. It's on the earth. It's not in some otherwhere. It's here. And the whole point of waking up to your divine consciousness is that you wake up to this radiance of divine presence in the universe, in other beings, and in yourself.
There's another way of being, another mode of consciousness, that we can free ourselves up from this attachment, this materiality. And when we do that, we begin to become more in tune with our world, with our environment, with other people. We become more compassionate. So I think the next stage is, having realized that's the basic problem, is then say, okay, what do we know? Just looking at the world's spiritual traditions and other metaphysical traditions, what do we know that can really help free up human consciousness?
Forging a connection with this universal consciousness is something that is available to everyone. However, we live in a turbulent world full of stressful lifestyles and traumatic conflicts that continuously tear us away from this source of life and unconditional love. We have literally been programmed to remain separate in order to better serve the needs of those in control. To remember where we came from, we must learn to see beyond these manufactured illusions, to open our hearts and minds to the unified force binding all of creation.
There is a reluctance, and in some cases an outright resistance, for the mainstream media, mainstream academia, classrooms, textbooks, to share the new discoveries. This would be important at any time, but it's especially critical right now because we are at this moment of crisis.
We have made an incredible technological advancement. We will go on the moon. We have GPS. We have the internet. We're up here on the physical realm of consciousness. But in the spirit, we are still 2,000 years ago in deceptive, dogmatic religious teaching. The gap needs to be adjusted. And that can be accomplished with cosmic consciousness, where not only you, but agreed. The people that are in power, the people that are in charge of your life, once they become cosmic conscious. Now we are talking about a very, very big difference.
Empire isn't playing a low consciousness game, it's playing a high consciousness game. That means that it needs our consent to function. It says, I'm going to change your reality, is that okay? And you go, yep, right, and then it can do it. If you say no, it can't touch you. It cannot touch you, it can do nothing.
This is where I believe we are now. I believe that the rise of consciousness is and allowing us to move rapidly towards that, and realizing we can move beyond the technology because the technology is actually in our bodies. Our bodies are the highest level of technology we can imagine.
The first thing to realize is to take responsibility for our own consciousness. It's easy to say, other people must change, but we're all part of them. I'm part of them. We must all change. And the only person I really have responsibility for is myself. It's how do I free myself from outdated conditioning.
Illusions are as powerful in their effects as is the truth. So free will is that I can think whatever I want to think. It's like I can make my theme that I'm a daughter of God, or I can make my theme something else. But to the extent to which I make it something else, the vision of one world costs you the vision of the other. So when I get lost in the story and in the manufactured, made-up illusions of the world, what are you going to be? What's your brand? What you going to do? What's your strategy? How are you going to make it happen? I, by definition, am entering into a realm where I'm always going to be seeking and I'm never going to be finding.
Once you realize that the whole universe is an emanation of consciousness, you can dissolve your karma by forgiveness and by accepting everything in the universe as being purely sacred. The consciousness of the universe wants us to grow into more than we are now.
And that is our salvation. And if we worked on that collectively, if institutions, individuals, organizations, whatever, made that a real focus, I think in a very short time we could actually have processes, techniques, things we could disseminate to the public which would really encourage that awakening of consciousness.
When we start living according to the definition of who we really are and start wiping that hard drive clean, only then will we evolve to another level.
It's the rising of the golden yeast of passionate love consciousness in millions and millions of human beings as a response to this appalling evolutionary crisis that we've created out of our own lunacy. And this passionate love consciousness, passionate for compassion, passionate for harmony, passionate for balance, passionate for justice, is rising now like a golden yeast in millions of human beings of all kinds all over the world.
I just think it's an exciting time if we all understand that message of how powerful we really are and start living it. Sometimes they'll say, oh, well, that's for them. It can't be for me. Well, yeah, it is for you. It's for all of us. And don't we all want to live this most empowered life that we can live and live the life we dream? I mean, it's not just for other people. It is for each and every one of us if we choose, make the decision to do it.
The reality we think we live in is merely an illusion, created and perpetuated by the forces who stand to gain from you remaining separate from the infinite love and wisdom that emanates from the source of all creation. Of course, you always have the free will to choose to live in this world of illusions or to share in a collective vision of light, life, love, and liberty that originates beyond the confines of our limited physical time-space reality. To seek beyond the illusions is to find a deeper meaning of the pure energy we call love. It is learning to share it, not for personal gratification, but for the benefits of all sentient beings, so that they too will learn to live in a life free of suffering and illusions.
Thank you for being there. Thank you for being a source of inspiration. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Be blessed by the divine. வாழ்க வளமுடன்.
வாழ்க வளமுடன். That is indeed a sumptuous full square meal, a sampurna ahara for our thoughts to the fullest extent. Of course, it could be much better to have a winding dessert add to it. So to conclude the session with this concluding speech, may I now call upon Assistant Professor Karthi from USA. Would like to share a few words about Professor Karthi. Karthi Karupaswamy is an avid practitioner of simplified Kundalini Yoga, being trained as a Sky Master from 2007, has been actively serving the Sky Meditation Center, Bahrain, in USA since 2012. Over there, he's one of the earliest facilitators of internet, social media, technologies, and data-centric tools to take Vethathiri into the non-Tamil speaking community. Over to you, Professor Karthik.
Thank you for this opportunity to share my views on consciousness 360 with brain and consciousness. And thank you, Krish Mulishwaraya, for giving us a very good compilation of Brahmayanam for YouTube age, I would say. We had a complete view of what is consciousness and how it is related with brain. And thank you so much for Dr. Gupta for joining us in such an early time and creating this occasion. Seeing from, most of all this content, what Krish Mulishwaraya sir was sharing with us, it's all on YouTube. But have we been exposed to that? Have we been looking for it? And from the way how it is compiled and starting with relating consciousness with the brain, with an incident, and step by step, beautifully going into a layer by layer to help us understand the relationship between consciousness and brain, and identifying brain as a seat of consciousness, an entity in which there is a correlation of consciousness happening, and going even further down to help us think that there is a functional state of consciousness. What is causing even the entities, even the neurons in the brain to function with consciousness? And beautifully summarizing that everything, the fundamental unit of this universal existence is not just matter, it's just a relationship, relation entity of functions, the order of functioning, as it beautifully summarized in the video as well. And all that we have within our limits is to emit this love and compassion from within us so that we can manifest this consciousness which is functioning within us so that we can serve the world. It's a great compilation of all the Brahmayanam topics we saw. Thank you, sir. And as it is pointed down in the very last video, if we really indeed want to make, unless I realize that I am the manifestation of divinity, it is not possible to see that manifestation in everyone else in this world. And to make that happen, it is not possible to go and just change someone who is in this leadership position, but it is only possible when there is enough people who have been realized of this state of consciousness, and when they raise it, there is going to be sustaining peace all over the world. And thank you for this opportunity to share these views and going through this very good compilation of consciousness. Be blessed by the divine. Thank you for the opportunity.
Be blessed by the divine. Thank you, Professor Karthik. Now I would like to invite Dr. Jayaprakash, the principal, or Arulnithi Arjun from the Vethathiri Maharishi College of Yoga, Chennai, on the important announcement about Google feedback form. Over to you, sir.
வாழ்க வையகம், வாழ்க வையகம், வாழ்க வளமுடன். Guru வாழ்க, Guruve Tunai, be blessed by the divine. So, it was a great evening indeed, a knowledgeable evening. And all my dear cosmic philosophers, there's one important announcement about feedback. Before getting to know about what is feedback, I have to share a small story. When a lot of interviews were made by an important VIP of India in the software field. His name he was a founder of Infosys, in fact. When people asked him, what made your company become a huge success all over the world? He answered with a simple question. And he said, if you are an emerging firm, if you have to succeed, there's only one thing you can do. And that one thing is collecting the feedbacks from your customers and make sure there's no loopholes in your system. And make sure you deliver everything on time to the customers. That will only make you succeed in whatever you do, not only a company or a firm or whatever it is. The feedback is very important. On that scenario, we, the Conscious 360 Degree, this great, marvelous progress towards knowing what is consciousness. This program is being held at every Saturdays, and we need to collect every feedback form from the people who are the cosmic philosophers who are attending this meeting. So I will share you two links now. The first link will be somebody this is the first meeting they are attending in this entire 6 weeks of sessions. They have to follow up and fill up all those Google feedback forms. And next, the link will be shared for the people who have already filled the feedback forms in the previous 5 sessions. So please, please, please just contribute some of your time to fill the feedback forms and help us, progress and elevate in the upcoming programs. And not only that, let us all strengthen the bond of Vethathirian. The Vethathirian should be linked throughout the lifetime, throughout till the world peace. So hope this feedback forms, if you guys fill this feedback forms, it will be a great help for us. And even as an elevation, we would use this to communicate to you in near future. Thank you. Varika Valamudan. And right now, I will be sharing the feedback links. Thank you. Varika Valamudan.
Thank you, Arulnithi Arjun Venkataraman. Feedback, yes, it's very important for personal as well as our professional improvement on any program on the quality of the deliverance. We'll now move upon to the discussion session or the question and answer session. Interested aspirants may click the raise button in the Zoom app, and we look forward to come with all doubts whatsoever to the speakers.